course, our programs and events, special events director, Yvonne Brandt.
Hello, everyone.
And at this point, I will turn everything over to Yvonne, who will introduce our speaker of the day, Mario Vittone. Right?
Right. Ooh, we nailed it. We got a little instruction before started. Yeah, we are just thrilled to be able to introduce you, Mario, for being with us here today. And I'm so glad that our scouts are able to join us, and looks like we've got loads of members. So we are really looking forward to this. So in case you don't know, Mario Vittone's background is as a Coast Guard helicopter rescue swimmer. And that in itself is quite an achievement, as there is a 50% washout rate to do that. Is that right, Mario? Heard that earlier.
Yeah, I wanted to quit the whole time.
And then went on to be a maritime accident investigator. And then after that, retired in 2013 and went on to an illustrious career with writing and so a man of many, many talents. And so now Mario is going to tell us a little bit about handling at sea emergencies.
Okay.
Have we?
Mario, I'm going to I'm assuming you need to share your screen.
I don't.
You don't. Oh, okay.
I don't have anything pretty to show you. Sorry,
Okay.
you have to look at me. I was just going to talk to you. I don't have a PowerPoint, or I'm not a PowerPoint guy.
Okay.
I prefer to talk in pictures. Hey, listen. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, Yvonne. Thanks for asking. It's been a quiet year for me in travel and speaking places. So this is nice, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to be fun to do a job in maritime safety where I'm not testifying or investigating why something bad happened, which is how I spend a certain amount of my time. I want to say hi to Art Pine and John Hines, who I see on, my buddies from Adventures Past. I just saw you were on there, so how do you?
Hi, Mario. Good to see you, buddy.
Good seeing you, man. Nice. You get the gear? Don't tell anyone I gave you the gear. They'll all be asking.
Okay, I won't tell anyone. That's our secret. That's our secret.
I was going through the warehouse and I found all that I work at a place called Life Saving Systems, and the company's 40 years old, and we had this massive go through the warehouse event where we're trying to figure out what's in the back warehouse. And I found all this cool gear that I can't use at all or can't sell. And I'm like, John will take it. I'll send it to Baltimore. Anyway. So
and the Marine Emergency Team 21 of Bowley's Quarters Volunteer Fire Company appreciates every bit of it, brother. Thank you very much.
Good. Hey, listen, I'm testifying next month for an Alaskan fishing boat that went down, and it got me thinking about what to talk to you guys about, and primarily what the problem is in handling at sea emergencies. There's two things there's only really two things you're trying to do, and that's increase your time of survival through the emergency and decrease the amount of time it takes to get someone to help you. I'm not going to talk so much about the particular case, except for it involves cold water and hypothermia and the need for help, and that's a problem of time. How much time can I live in the water cold, and how soon will someone get here to get me out of it? And if you haven't heard me before, I'm going to start this talk the way I start all these talks, with the 5 rules of safe boating. And I didn't, when I stopped being a rescue swimmer and went into Marine inspection, they send you to this course called MIC, or the Marine Inspector's Course. And there are 7 linear feet of books on the desk. And those books are all of the Code of Federal Regulations, the Federal Registrar, and the Safety of Life at Sea regulations. And it literally is, it's a full double width desk full of books in front of you, and they're yours. and they're going to teach you to navigate those. And the course really is about how to navigate the books, not necessarily what's in them. But it was just so much thrown at you all at once. I had to find a way to contextualize it. And as I'm reading all these rules, all of them usually written in blood, one mishap leading to new rules to avoid the next mishap. I realized that they were all categorized in 5 different rules, and these are the 5 rules of, and these are mine. You won't see these anywhere else really, but this is what all those rules and regulations that you have to follow as a professional mariner come down to. And rule number 1, keep the water on the outside of the boat. That's every rule about hull thickness and the security of hull penetrations, and whether you have 2 clamps on your sea strainer or just 1, and how high above the water the through hull penetrations have to be, and all of that, and drainage calculations, and all those rules to do with the hull integrity. So rule number 1 is keep the water on the outside of the boat. Rule number 2 is keep all the bad stuff on the boat. And so that's fuel containment and oil containment and bilge containment and all that, the garbage litigate, all the rules for where you can dump garbage and sewage. So rule number 1, keep the water on the outside of the boat, keep all the bad stuff inside the boat. Rule number 3 is keep the boat from catching fire or blowing up. And that's all the regulations they have about wiring and firefighting and whether or not you have, even there's regulations for small passenger vessels on housekeeping, how clean are you keeping your boat? The 4th rule of boating is keep everyone on the boat, right? Safe and on the boat. And that's all regulations to do with whether you carry first aid kits or medical training you have to have, and the height of railing, and whether or not you tie into the boat, and who can be on deck in bad weather, all those regulations. And the last rule of safe boating is if any of that goes wrong, if any of the first 4 go wrong, call somebody. And not calling somebody is when a professional captain loses their license or the Coast Guard comes after your license. 96% of the time, those actions against professional mariners have to do with failure to report. It's not that something went wrong, it's that you didn't say it soon enough, is what gets most people into trouble. Not saying it soon enough also, by the way, happens to be the thing that gets most people into trouble, real trouble, not with the regulators. And so in responding to maritime accidents, in investigating maritime accidents, in studying and researching maritime accidents, I've never seen one ever that I couldn't trace back to a bad decision made by the captain before leaving the dock. Now, put aside things like slip and falls or a heart attack, you've got a passenger on board who has no history and they end up getting sick. Those aren't anyone's fault. That's just life at sea. But otherwise, if there's been an accident that caused a major mishap, when you go back far enough, it always comes back to decisions and actions that happen pierside. And that's always stuck in my craw a little bit, in that the idea that a professional mariner is 25 times less likely to call Mayday than a recreational boater, boating hour for boating hour. And that's got to do with those rules, believe it or not, imposed upon you, and the training imposed upon you, and the experience and the documentation of that experience imposed upon you. But to a large degree, it's got a lot to do with the regulators forcing on you the idea that you have a safety management system and think about it. So Today we're going to talk about at sea emergencies. I'm just going to cover some of my favorite uh, and how I think you ought to respond to them, and how I'm an expert in days gone bad. Like if you met me at work, you know, I hated boats for most of my life. Hated them. Hated boaters even worse, because if I was on a boat, it was either sinking or upside down or on fire, and it wasn't fun. So if you asked me, "Hey Mario, let's go boating," I'd be like, "I thought we were friends. Like, I don't get it." And because it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun for me. But then I realized that, you know, it can be, and it just depends on the attitude of the mariner. I wrote an article for Soundings Magazine last year called the three people I won't sail with. Like this, and it's all got it's usually got to do with just having an attitude of safety, really. So the first one I want to talk about is Man Overboards. I get called out a lot to give training on or to look at someone's emergency procedures and tell them what I think about them. And the one that always gets me is Man Overboard. If I ask you, and this isn't the forum to do it, but if I ask you, what's the first thing you do in a man overboard? Like, so if someone goes off the boat, what's the first thing you do? And the answer is always, and at least half of you are thinking it, is you yell man overboard and point. And that's not what the regulations say. In subchapter T and subchapter H and every regulation for a man overboard situation, the first thing that's supposed to happen is you're supposed to throw flotation. It's not yell man overboard. It's throw flotation. And so as a vessel inspector, when we would do the man overboard drill, I would always watch for that, and I would always make them throw the flotation. Because in a drill, you usually simulate. I'd throw the life ring, and they do this motion where they act like they're throwing the life ring, and I'd say, go ahead and do it. And then you find out exactly how wrapped around the axle the line is, or how stuck to the bracket the paint is, or, you know, when's the last time that life ring's been out of the bracket. And so I was on a container ship once, and they simulated pulling the pin for the drop life ring, and I grabbed onto the ring and said, pull the pin. And it took them 3.5 minutes to get the pin out because it was corroded in place, and they hadn't had that pin out of there in a year. And you know, the actual act of actually doing it is different than talking about doing it. And so so the first thing for handling man overboards is to really practice man overboards. And that is, don't talk about throwing the flotation, throw the flotation. Some of you are going to lose your life rings forever. And that's okay. It's better than losing your buddy or a passenger forever. And that flotation becomes real important, particularly up there where you guys boat on the Chesapeake, which is in January, February, and most of March, the coldest water in the US, or as cold as any other water in the US. Colder than Kodiak, Alaska, colder than Sitka, Alaska, as cold as Woods Hole, Mass. You guys are not in the South. When you're out there boating on the Chesapeake Bay in January and December and February, and now, this time of year, you're on the coldest water in the US that's not frozen, right? You're in as hazardous environment as can be found anywhere. And so back to man overboards. If someone goes over, there's two ways to respond to a man overboard. There's two kinds of man overboard. And what I run into with, it was a Professional Pilots Association, and they had me come in and look at their procedures, and they had a really detailed procedure for man overboards, and it was all about communication. Well, first we call the tower and tell them we have a man overboard, and then we get on the radio and we call the Coast Guard, and there was 2 radio calls while the crew's simultaneously taking action, and those radio calls were to be done by the captain. And I said, it's a horrible idea to distract the captain when someone goes overboard. So there's two kinds of man overboard, and I want you to think about this and make this part of your procedures. There's the kind of man overboard where I can still see the person. If you can see the person, if they fall off your boat and you have eyes on, if anybody has eyes on, the only thing you're trying to do is keep your eyes on them. If someone leaves your boat and you lose sight of them and you have to call somebody, there is a 40% chance they will not be found alive or dead, ever. So a man overboard is about do not lose sight of them, right? And so if someone's looking at him, if the captain can see him, you don't want the captain to take it. You don't want him looking for the radio. You don't want him trying to dial a note. You don't want him trying to turn a knob. Eyes on the person driving that way, and the crew's only focus is keeping their eyes on him. So a man overboard with a person in sight, you work that problem until the person's back on the boat. Yes, you have to report the man overboard if you're a professional captain on the water. You're supposed to report that. Report it when they're back on the boat or you got your hands on them. Do not distract yourself with anything else but keeping your eyes on them and getting to them and getting them flotation. That idea of throwing flotation, if they go overboard and you're doing 10 knots and you don't get that ring out in 30 seconds, you're not going to get it to them. You might get it overboard and they can get to it, but it's not like you're going to reach them with it. And so the type of vessel matters, and the speed matters, and the waterway matters, and all that matters. But what matters most is you keep your eyes on them. If you lose sight of them, it's an entirely different procedure. All right, once you've lost sight of that person, or the man overboard is you heard him go over and it's dark and you can't see him at all, then you have to come up with a whole nother plan. And I've always been a fan of, if someone goes overboard and you lose sight of them, all stop, quick, quiet. Like there's this nature to turn. I want to turn the boat and go back. And I'm not sure that's the best plan, rather, because if they're still up and they're above the surface of the water, they are yelling at you. And if you're full throttle into the turn to get back to them and you can't see them, you may or may not be hearing that. So you can turn around slower. You can go stop, you can listen, see if they're talking to you, you can talk to them, call out to them, and then slowly make your turn to go back. These aren't things to be rushed. And then, of course, if you don't have them, by all means, mayday, 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 right? And make your call. A man overboard you don't see is not a pond. It's the most hazardous thing in maritime. It kills more people than anything at sea, is leaving the boat. It's the most dangerous thing to do in maritime, is to leave the boat. And so you've got a real problem on your hands. And I'm not going to get into the difference between a Williamson turn on a larger ship and just spinning the boat around on a small boat. You're a captain. That's your job to figure that out. What I want to get across on man overboards is there's two kinds. You see them, your job's to keep seeing them till you get them back. Hopefully you get them back on and you laugh about they fall overboard, and you've got your, what's the rule for T-boats? You've got 24 hours to report that or something, right? You got to make an official report. But if you see them, your job's to keep seeing them until you get them back on the boat. Don't lose sight. Don't go into some convoluted procedure. Just get them back on the boat. If you don't see them, then you've got a different plan to work. All right. Any questions about that? I'm looking. Let me look at the chat because I haven't been paying attention to that. I see the numbers clicking up. No, I just know that people are from Brooms Island and Chevy Chase, Maryland. Cool. Okay, so no questions on Man Overboard? Fair enough.
I guess I have a question. So you were saying that you'd go straight to Mayday and not wouldn't worry about a pon if you could see the person, right?
No.
Radio, so you get them on board, and then you would.
If you can see them, I wouldn't make a call at all.
Yeah.
until they're back on the, if you see them, get them back on the boat. Don't stop and make a radio call. All right, this idea of pon versus mayday, I've never heard a pon from anyone but the Coast Guard. I've never been to a rescue where there wasn't time to call a pon and they didn't. Right? I know mariners have called pon. I'm saying I haven't heard it on the radio flying over the, it's not common. And in a room of unprofessional boaters, I ask them what pon. None of them have. Invariably, if there's 100 people in a room, 2 of them have an idea what, are willing to raise their hands and say they know what pon means. You know, and practically pon is, I have a problem. I think I got it under control, and I don't need help, but I might need help. That's pon. If someone leaves your boat and you don't find him anymore, that's not pon. I got a problem I'm working on. I think it'll be fine. I can't find someone off my boat. I've got a 4 in 10 chance of never seeing them alive or dead. I don't know what we're waiting for on Mayday. All right, that's not a I've got a leak and I'm fixing it. That's a pon. I've lost an engine, I got 2. That's a pon. I've got a guy who's having chest pains. He says he's fine, but we're coming back in. That's a pon. And so if they're overboard and you can't see them again, you've got a clear Mayday. That's it. You know, someone's left your boat. They're going to die if you don't get them back and you can't see them. And you've only got a 60% chance of you and all your friends finding them. All right. And it's most, you know, the boat you left is, well, that's my favorite thing to, everyone thinks the boat you left is your best chance of rescue. And that's true. It's not the most common form of rescue. When someone goes missing from a boat and they don't get picked up by the boat again, that's rare. Excuse me.
Mario, there's Laura Olson had her hand raised, but I don't see anything in the chat. Laura, can you unmute and ask a question?
She said, can you expect on your statement, I'll stop quick, expand on my statement of all, let me go back to, Jim's asked, what's the plan if you don't see them? Jim, the plan if you don't see them is then that's when you get on the radio. I say I'll stop quick quiet, which is, I want to stop, and if I'm in an environment where I think I can hear them, like it's a quiet night, I'll stop the boat, shut everything down and call out their name and listen. And maybe I can hear where they are. And then start moving the vessel towards the voice. Whereas if you just turn the boat, and you might miss those audible cues. Because if they're above the water, which you hope they are, then they're going to be yelling at you if you stop the boat and you're turning. Hit the MOB button on a chart plotter ASAP. Yes, if you don't see them and if you lost them, that's fine. Now, I don't believe in hitting the chart plotter if you're the one. So who's that? That's Alan. Alan, if you have your eyes on them, don't take your eyes off of them to find the button on the chart plotter. Keep your eyes on them. You don't need to hit the button on the chart plotter. You can see them. You see them and you lose sight of them, hit the button on the chart plotter. But hitting the button on the chart plotter may be the reason you quit seeing them. I took some photographs, and I'll try and get them to you, of what a person looks like in the water from 200 feet, from 300 feet in a helicopter. And 300 feet is about the search height of a helicopter. And the number of times I've flown over people several times before we saw them would, hollow out your soul. I've picked up guys who said I flew over them in a Carolina skiff 6 times and didn't see them. And so finding someone in the water is really hard. So if you can see them, so Alan, if you can see them, don't do anything that's going to make you stop seeing them. Don't look for a button on your chart plotter. Don't grab the radio. You just keep your eyes on them. Start moving your boat in that direction. If you stop seeing them, then that's it. Can you expand on your? I'll stop quick, Laura. I'll stop quick. Quiet. It's just that. It's just about spending some time listening. All right. If your MOBs, if it's splash, they just went over and it's dark and they're out of sight, stop the boat and listen and call out for their name and see if you can hear them. If you just throttle around and start heading back to where you think they might be, you might hit them. You might not hear them yelling at you as you pass by them. right? And so think about quiet for a second. Are you encouraging a line attached to a throwable or just chuck the throwable? I'm encouraging both. Chuck the throwable with a line on it. If most man overboards happen at the dock, and then they fall off and you laugh at them and pick them back up. And then the second most common man overboard is either working or fishing. So they're working over the side or they're fishing and they fall off, and the boat's not moving terribly fast, and they pick them up. But if you've got, say, 70 feet of line on your throw line attached to your life ring, it's amazing how fast 70 feet goes by when someone goes over. So unless your captain's just Johnny on the spot and stopping that boat and pinning it around, you're going to have to let go of that line. You know, the line on that rope is when you come up next to them and you throw the line, you throw the flotation past them, drag it towards them, and get the line. But I like throwing it with the line.
Yeah, Mario, I'll just throw a little my own thing there about the line. Just like you said, if you throw the device to the person and it goes past them, it allows them to grab that line.
Right.
Because the line is supposed to be floating also. That's the big thing. It's supposed to be a floating line, not one that sinks.
Yeah, just some polypro will do it. And it's about getting, you're supposed to pull it back towards them. And it's one of those things that's also fun to practice. Every time I give these talks in person, I found at a marina, go ahead and throw, if you haven't thrown if you haven't in the last 2 months thrown a life ring on a line, your range or azimuth is going to be junk. Like, you're going to miss it. Like, you're not going to throw it hard enough, or you're going to throw it too hard, or you're going to be off. Like anything. Now listen, if everyone on your boat's wearing flotation, if the person that goes over has flotation and you know it, there's not much reason to throw your life ring over. But it's a real good spot marker, and so I like throwing it anyway. So to answer that question, I just want to throw it over, and like throw it with the line, because maybe they can't get to the device, but they'll run into the line. I mean, throw lines are funny stuff. We make and sell a lot of throw lines at work. And we make one for the Coast Guard, and the line is so thick that they can do side tows with it. It's this beast of a nylon jacketed polypro line. It's absurdly overkill, and they like to throw it at people who are drowning. And I'm like, a person who's drowning is not going to grab that line. It's not going to float them. They need flotation. They don't need a rope. If you throw a rope to someone who's actively engaged in drowning, they're just going to drown with a rope next to them. They're not going to grab it. It's not going to help them stay afloat. It's going to give up one of their hands that's helping them stay above the water. So that's that. Somebody asked about heavy seas and surf. Then you're in a mess, and that sucks. There's no extra advice for that. If the idea of listening, if it's super loud and windy, then listening's not going to do you any good. I'm just saying consider it. All right. I'm just saying consider it. It's not, there's no good for all situations plan there. How many of you, and I know I've had this exact question with this exact group before. And I know that if you're running your boat under your license, say you're a T-boat operator or something, then the Coast Guard's talked to you about it before, but how many of you have registered your Dsc radio with your MMSI number? I have. All right, go ahead, Brett. Yes, good. That number's been going up and up, but if you haven't, you absolutely have to do it. The Dsc radios have been, since 99? Since 1999, if they made a radio, it had to have Dsc capability. It's free. You get extra credit if you know the code for taking on water, and the code for fire, and the code for Man Overboard. But there's these radios are all coded, so you have a 2-digit code that will tell the Coast Guard not only that it's your boat and that you're in trouble in this spot, but what the nature of the emergency is. And that takes, reading the manual and practice usually. But that's another great game changer for particularly small crews, because you handle your notification problem. And because if you call the Coast Guard, they're going to talk to you. You pick up the radio on 16 and call for the Coast Guard, you're in for a conversation, right? And they're hard to get out of. And the kid at the watch center doesn't care. And he's got a checklist with a bunch of questions he has to ask. None of them are helping you solve your problem. He's trying to solve his. And if you have your DSC set up and you can tell them that my nature of distress is I'm taking on water, I'm in this position, this is my boat and my number, then you can go back to work and ignore the kid because someone's coming. If you work for a company, should you make sure the company has registered the radios? Why, yes, you should. Good luck, making the company do something, but yeah, they should. Now, if you do that, realize that the DSC radios have the ability, if you work for a company, and this is how you get the company to do it. If you want to get your company to register the radios and they're not, you point out to them that if they tie the radios to the GPS, that they can ping the radios and ask the radios for their position, and they'll give them the position of the boat without the intervention of the captain or crew. So it's like, you want to find out where I am, you just hit these buttons and the radio will tell you where I am and I can't stop it. And so there's a little big brother to it that they tend to like. You can always ping the boats and ask them for their location because all of the radios now, you can tie it to the GPS. So you tie the DSC radio to the GPS, and then the fleet manager can find the location of his fleet of boats by pushing a few buttons. Did her head count scarred and him missing? Oh, the current found him. Yeah, Jim's telling a story about a guy going missing and the captain following the current and finding him. It can be done. What was that case? There was a mariner that went over. God, he was out there for like 42 hours or 36 off a cruise ship or and the boat itself went back and found him and picked him up. That was on G-Captain just the other day. Yeah, it can be done. It's just, you need warm water. Flotation makes it a lot easier. And I was on a container ship and we did a Man Overboard drill where we used a 3-foot by 3-foot box painted orange and threw it over the side as the target. It was 15 miles off Miami. It was flat, calm, sunny, blue, middle of the day, and we never saw it again. Couldn't find it. 16 people on the bridge, couldn't find it. We did the Williamson turn, came back, never saw it. I think, I think the sail area on that thing was pretty big and the wind took it, but still that we couldn't spot that. It's hard to find someone at sea. It's just tough. You don't, keep the people on the boat. All right. The other one I want to talk to you about is medical. The number one thing that goes wrong at sea is you. And if you don't believe that, you're all on your computers or maybe you're on your phone, but open up a browser, go to Google and search the phrase Coast Guard Medevacs, MEDEVACS. Just put in the phrase Coast Guard Medevacs and start reading. And when you pick your jaw up from how many of those reports there are, because it happens every day, there's a press release where the Coast Guard had to medevac somebody, like daily. The number one thing that goes wrong on boats are people on the boat. It's usually a medical problem. It's sometimes injuries, but often it's just medical emergencies, right? Stroke, heart attack, upper GI bleed, some other problem we didn't know he had, appendicitis, who knows what, other injuries, right? Or it's traumatic injuries. They fell over, they hit their head on something, they broke an arm, whatever it is. Now, as a captain, what you don't want to do is have the Coast Guard or the sheriffs or whoever's going to come out to help you out get there, and they go, "What can you tell me about this guy?" And you go, "Oh, absolutely nothing. I have no earthly idea. I don't know who his doctor is. Is he on any medications? No earthly idea. Is he allergic to something? I don't know. I have no earthly idea." Now, every time I did a medevac from a container ship or a ro-ro or a car carrier or it didn't matter. I would go get the wiper who was having appendicitis, and the captain would hand me a manila envelope, which was every medical thing they knew about the cat. Here's everything we know in an envelope. I've never done a medevac of a professional mariner like that and not been handed an envelope that has everything we're ever going to need to know about him and how to get him back. And so I came up with, for wreck boaters, I came up with an adult medical history questionnaire. And so it's just a 1-pager. Now, I'm not talking about you going out for 3 hours or you run a ferry, it's not that. But if you're going to spend an extended amount of time with passengers on your boat, or if I'm going to go on your boat, I'm going to hand you an envelope. And I go, "What's that?" I'm like, "That's me if I get hurt and can't talk." Right? I want you to hand that to the guy. Now, I'm lucky. I don't have any meds and I don't have any severe allergies and I don't have much of a history to report. But, a lot of people do have meds they're on and medical history that the ER doc would like to know. And so having that envelope, like having your own way to have an envelope. And another rule I have on when I go out, if you're on meds, your meds go with you on our trip or you don't go. The number of diabetic 12-year-olds who I've had to go pick up because they didn't have their insulin because it was only a 3-hour trip and they only take the shot twice a day is amazing, because the boat runs aground and now we're not going to be back in an hour, we're going to be back in 7. And now there's a diabetic emergency they packed sandwiches and beer but not insulin, or you didn't bring your nitro, or you didn't bring this pill that you take once a day, but and so there's no reason not to insist that meds come aboard. Now, as a professional captain, you got a HIPAA problem with that. But what you can do is offer them that form that says, "Please fill this out, seal it in an envelope. I'm going to hand it back to you unopened. But if anything happens, then I've got your medical history to hand to the Coast Guard or to hand to the ambulance or to hand to whoever I hand you over to if you can't speak for yourself."
Mario, let me interject one thing here because I do it. And I am a type 2 diabetic. So I know, I've been for a while, I know a lot about this. Most of us carry our cell phones.
Mhm.
There's an app called Medical ID, free.
Right.
And with that medical ID, you can put in all of your information and it'll be on your phone. Not only will it be on your phone,
Mhm.
but there's a way that has a little symbol that goes on the locked screen that
Right.
even if your screen is locked, you double tap that and all your information comes up.
Right.
So most of us carry this and it's a free app. So it's well worth. You put you list all your meds, whether you're an organ donor, your height, weight, blood type, the whole 9 yards.
Right.
So I recommend it.
Yeah. Yeah, Alan just said we provide all the information for what should be in the envelope in our CAPCA CPR first aid class. Well, that's it. And so anyway, if you don't have an envelope or a way to give someone else or that Med ID, or I had a thing called Road ID. It was a bracelet and it had that, and you could go to roadid.com, put my number in, and it would tell you everything, who to call and all that stuff. So there's those things out there, but consider on the boat, because the golden hour and the golden 15 minutes and all those things you talk about in emergency response, you don't get those, an hour and a half offshore, and so anything you can do to change that part of the game is worth doing. All right. Now I just want to field questions now. Does anybody have? I take that back. Like I got my 100-ton, but I've never been paid a nickel to be a captain. If I'm on your boat, I am rail meat. Like I'm almost useless. I want to go, don't get me wrong. But don't expect me to work too hard. Like I'm one of those guys. However, I have been to the end of more bad days or has been to the end of many bad days. Like if you're a good captain, you haven't had a lot of bad days, but I've been to the worst end of all of them. So is there any particular question anyone has that particular brand of experience might help you out with?
You said something, it was interesting. You said something very interesting to me that I might have misunderstood. You said that a lot of the accidents happen because of bad decisions made before leaving the dock. Is that what did I hear that correctly? What does that, what does that, what
What does that mean? Okay, so if you haven't cleaned out your fuel tanks in 6 years and you lose power because your fuel tanks are sludged up, that's a bad decision made before leaving the dock. If you gave your crew absolutely zero training for what to do if you become the medical emergency, that's a bad decision made before leaving the dock. If no one on the boat but you knows where the fuel cutoff is, that's a bad decision made before leaving the dock. If you head out into crappy ass weather you shouldn't head out into with no plan for, anything but everything going right, that's a bad decision made before leaving the dock. And that list goes on. Decisions to sail are huge. If you, I got a video online. I think if you just Google it, you can find it. But I'll send it on. It's in the Life Saving Systems video library too. It's how I set up my life jacket. Right? If my life jacket is set up like I'm going overboard, like I'm definitely going over. Like I've prepared my life jacket not for in case I go over. I'm definitely going over. And I don't need you for anything. Like, I hope you see me go over and you get me back. But if you don't, I'm okay, man. Someone's picking me up. I've got an EPIRB. I've got a radio. I've got 2 flashlights. I've got, and if the water's cold, I'm dressed for it, And so, those are decisions made before leaving the dock. Mostly it's about vessel maintenance, crew training, and just risk decision making. If you're taking, I'll give you a classic example. I decided when I made warrant officer that I would take 20 days off and I was going to kayak the Chesapeake Bay from Elk Neck State Park down to Virginia Beach. I did not make it. I tried my best to become a SAR case. And by the time I got to Kent Narrows, I came into Kent Narrows from the north around that spit. I don't know how I didn't get knocked out of my canoe. My kayak. I get around, there's a couple standing on their lawn right there, and they're both shaking their head. And then I get into the dock, and the guy makes a joke. He says, "You want to pump out?" It's like a joke. And I've been at this all day. I've been paddling for 12 hours. I just want something to eat, And he goes, "Did you come that way? Did you come around this? Did you come in from the north?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Don't do it again. Don't come in that way. Don't go out that way. Like, you shouldn't have made it. There's no way." And then I'm having dinner at this bar right there, and the crabbers were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm kayaking down to Virginia Beach." He goes, "From here?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You can't leave Kent Narrows and go south and ever find water. We're not going out tomorrow. What do you mean you're going? You're not going anywhere." I had no planning at all. I just load up my boat with stuff and figure it out. I'd go do it. That was, I tried really hard to get myself in trouble. I ended up, calling it off and getting a ride home. But that was a bad decision. I was by myself in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay in a kayak. 2 weeks before the trip, I had this checklist. I had a checklist of where I was putting. I had staged some batteries and food at different Coast Guard stations I was going to stop off at. And the last thing on my checklist was buy a kayak and learn how to paddle it. Anyway, and a week later I did that, and then I went on this trip and really damn near killed myself. But bad decision made before leaving the dock. Is there more or most a common, somebody's got Captain Brett says, is there a more or most common medevacs I've had to run on? The most common, no, there's not. It's every reason you would, Brett, it's every reason you would call 911 to get picked up. I've been on strokes, I've been on dive accidents, more than a few diabetic kids, a couple diabetic adults, chest pains, seasickness that lead to the fear of chest pains is a big one, right? If you're, or seasickness that leads to cardiac problems. More than a few of those. And then a good fair share of slip and falls. Boats are unsteady things and people fall, and if someone hits their head on your boat, they're leaving your boat. Captain, if someone falls under your care on your boat and they hit their head, we're going in. You don't keep head injuries with you at sea. All right, they sprain their wrist and they want to stay and keep fishing, or they say they're fine. You can. I'd allow them to make that call. Then I don't want to run the trip for everybody. I'll just sit here and be miserable over a wrist sprain or whatever. Fine. They hit their head. Nope, we're going in. You have chest pains. We're going in. Right. And the other one is if they mentally don't know, if they start to have sort of a neurological event of any kind, we're going in. And those are things. So the last thing you have to do is, hold on, another question. Where was your tour of duty for the bulk of your medevacs? Air Station Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and Air Station New Orleans, Louisiana. Okay. All right, I got 3 questions here. I'll start at the top. Someone asked about a time I was actually swimming to rescue someone. Do you really need outstanding swimming skills? Yeah. Listen, to be a helicopter rescue swimmer, you absolutely have to have you absolutely have to be comfortable in the water. Most rescue cases, you don't use the swimming, most of them. And most rescue cases where you have to get in the water, you don't really, the helicopter moves. You don't have to do a lot of swimming. The helicopter will come to you, They put you in the water. I got to swim up to the person. But once I have the person, I'm not swimming anymore. We're staying right there and the helicopter's coming to us. However, sometimes the SAR case doesn't always pay attention to that plan, and the boat's at anchor and you got to swim crosswise to current. I've done a case where I had to swim for 400 yards to pull off the rescue of 3 people through 6-foot rollers and breakers. It was miserable, and I was not, no rescue swimmer has ever pulled the inflation on their life jacket during a rescue, and I wasn't going to be the first, but man, did I want to be the first. I was trying to figure a way that I could pull that off without actually admitting it. So yeah, you have to be able to swim. Holding your breath is, if you have to hold your breath, you don't really have a choice. So it's what I learned. It's one of the limiting things I learned in rescue swimmer school is that when I start to do that gasping for breath, that lurching, that really lurching for breath, that I can do that for about a minute before I'm in any real trouble. My life jacket setup. There's a good video on that. In fact, hold on, don't go anywhere, kids. I can do this. Or let's see, video library. Okay, maybe not. Let me do another question. Medevac off small boats. Medevac off small boats are usually small. They're usually injuries or heart problems. People slip and fall and get hurt, and it's because small boats move around a lot and they're unstable. And often it's the captain. And that's another thing is you have to prepare. Everyone has drill that they do man overboard drills. And we weren't allowed, the Coast Guard would not let me do this as a Marine inspector. I was not allowed to make a captain do a man overboard where the captain was the man overboard. They consider that harass. Oh, you're harassing him. I'm like, he's the most likely guy to go overboard. And so you weren't allowed to test the captain of a T-boat to see if his crew could handle him going overboard. But you should be able to test that. I'm going to put a link to the video of how I set up my life jacket.
Looks like Priscilla already got it for you.
Did she?
Yes. She's
Well, that's one. That's a good one. Here's a better one. Here's a newer one. But thanks. That's an article, and then that's a Vimeo video that I just made in January. Yeah, life jacket.
Megan with a hand up. Somebody has the hand up. Megan.
Yeah, this is Adam Yearwood. Not sure why Megan shows up. Sorry. But yeah, hey, really good advice. So I sailed first part of my career professionally, commercially rather, hauling chemicals, refined product, lots of dangerous cargo. And now in the latter part of my career, I'm doing some fun stuff and taking out actually the most dangerous cargo I've experienced, which is people. And one of the big problems I see out there is alcohol. And the problem is, unlike a bar, you can't, it's difficult to cut them off. I've had to bring a boat in early, but I'm just curious what other advice you have for captains who encounter intoxicated people, which is a judgment call. And advice like, do you call the Coast Guard right away, DNR? I mean, there's a relationship too with the clients that are on there. Some may be intoxicated, the other ones may not. So it's a tough call, but I'm just curious what advice you have.
I actually, believe it or not, I have an opinion about that of mine that I happen to agree with. I think you have to talk to them. That's a back at the dock problem, Cap. You gotta, before they get drunk, before they go out, you have to have that very real conversation with them. Say, listen, I want you to have fun. I want you to, there's alcohol on the boat and that's fine. Have a good time. But if it gets out of hand, you're putting my other passengers at risk. And I can't tolerate that. And when you couch it to them that way, when they're sober, they're less inclined to be that guy or that girl who didn't listen to you. And they're less inclined to argue with you when you're telling them, because it's not about them and you're having a problem with them as you're watching out for the safety of that argument has always seemed to work. That argument's worked for me as a rescuer going down to a boat where the guy is drunk and injured. And that's the problem. I'm like, hey man, you're putting everyone else in danger. Like, I don't mind you screwing yourself up, but like you're gonna hurt other people. And that'll usually slow it down, I found. So have those conversations. Some of the best vessel briefs I've had are about drugs and alcohol before the boat leaves. And you can also find out who you have to watch out for. So if you have a party of like 10 or 12 people or something, and you start having that conversation about how I want you to have fun, I want you to have a good time. I can't, me and the crew won't be drinking, but you certainly can. But the sun and the motion of the boat intensifies the effect of alcohol. So if it gets out of hand, you're gonna, I don't want it to go too far. Listen for jokes. Listen who's getting joked about. Right? That's your target. That's your person. Like if the other crew says, yeah, Bill, if they do that, then pay attention to Bill. Because they know Bill. And they knew to egg Bill when you were talking about keeping it under control. It just makes it easier conversation to have. Now, if they get seriously out of hand, then yeah. I stop the trip. Stop the trip.
Yeah, Mario, let me add also, I've run commercial charter boats where we've taken charter parties out, but these boats also had liquor licenses.
Yeah.
And under those liquor licenses, you are obligated to
Yeah.
control
Right.
the intake. Generally, we'll have a bartender. And my bartenders have all the authority to cut people off. And if, as you said, if they don't want to cooperate, you terminate the charter.
Yeah.
They don't get their money back, and we'll go back to the dock. I've never had any qualms about turning the boat around, taking it back to the dock, and kicking your butt off,
Yeah.
because you're putting everybody else in danger.
Yeah.
And I think that the biggest thing that ever happened with me is I had about 90-some people on a charter, a multi-deck charter boat, where a fight actually broke out over some nonsense. And we had to call the Harbor Patrol. I run boats on Potomac.
Yeah.
And they met us. I was within 10 minutes of whatever was going on. Our boat was surrounded by DC Harbor, as well as a fireboat. They took people off that needed to be taken off, escorted us back to the dock, which I terminated it. And we had law enforcement on the dock itself to keep the parties separated. So it can get a little antsy, but again, it's planning and you know what to do.
Hey, somebody asked a question. I'll answer this one last question, and if that's it, then. But somebody asked my opinion, and I love this question. It's my favorite question ever. Is what's my opinion versus EPIRBs versus AIS versus SARTs? And I am still, until they invent something else, if I had to pick one in the life jacket, I'm carrying an EPIRB, because the AIS requires too many other people to know what they're doing with AIS. And it's the boat I left is the best one to come back and get me. That's true, but they have to have the AIS up. They have to know how to use it. And if they don't, then I'm signaling nobody if I'm far enough offshore. Whereas if I have my EPIRB and I've set my EPIRB upright, in 60 seconds, the world's going to know where I am, the boat I fell off of. They'll be calling them because I'll put that information in there. And for sure, someone's coming to get me. With AIS, someone might come get me. I'd like to have them both. All right, I don't have to carry just one. But if I had to carry one, I'm picking EPIRB every day and twice on Sunday. So that's it. All right, kids.
All right. Thank you so much, Mario. Actually, I had one more thing that maybe you can make a comment on, and then we'll let you rest up. So you wrote a few years ago a paper on experience, why experience doesn't matter.
Yes.
And I found that piece really telling for people on both ends of experience, those just starting and those that have been around forever, from the perspective of, if you've been on the water for 30 years, that you sort of feel like you've seen everything, but in some ways you're the most vulnerable for something to happen. And then if you're the youngest person on board, such as our scouts, then you think you have nothing to contribute when you may be the one that sees what's about to, cause a major mishap. So I just wondered if you could talk to that for a minute.
Yeah, I think experience is a rotten teacher. I love writing that piece or one like it, and I love having that conversation. Experience is a rotten experience. It's not that experience is invaluable, it's a rotten teacher. If you've got 60,000, if you got 30,000 miles under your keel and you've never had a terribly bad day where you had to call Mayday, then you've got a whole lot of experience with nothing going wrong, or not much going wrong, which may or may not have anything. Who's the captain? Smith, the captain of the Titanic, was interviewed 2 years before it sank and talked about how impossible he thought it was for a modern ship to sink at sea. Because in his experience, he's never had any experience whatsoever where anything ever went wrong with a ship at sea. And so if your experience hasn't taught you to be humble and to know that you don't know what you're doing, then your experience has been useless. That's what I think. And if we have to fight, we have to fight. But And there's arguments that, I know that the experience matters, and I want to be with an experienced captain, but I want to be with an experienced captain who's humble, whose experience has taught them that, man, things go wrong out there, and I need your help, Sea Scout. You're going to see something. My favorite pilot to fly with was Dan Moulton, who would always make eye contact with the youngest, most inexperienced person on the aircraft and say, look, if you see anything, whatever it is, man, tell me. I don't know. Like, I won't see everything. You have to tell me. He would make that point to the most inexperienced person on the boat. And he was fallible, and he would let you know he was not. He was the least likely guy to make a mistake. And I think those two things are related. I think that his humility is why he was less likely to make mistakes. Just like people who make checklists are less likely to need them. And just like I've never picked up anyone ever who had a float plan, ever. I'd never been on a rescue mission ever where someone handed me a float plan, because people who make float plans make good decisions before leaving the dock and don't get in trouble. So experience is good if it taught you that. If it didn't, then you're just the person who calls themselves captain, and cool, but it's not gonna keep you safe. The ocean doesn't care that you've got your unlimited. Doesn't care. All right.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I dropped my email in the chat. If anyone has any questions, let me know after the fact. And it's been great. Thanks so much.
All right. Fantastic.
Thank you.